Baby farming is always a disturbing topic. It is well known in Victorian times. Lots of people lived with their partners, even if they weren't married, and lots of extramarital sexual relations. But in reality, the mainstream moral values of this period emphasized abstinence and sexual restraint, with great importance placed on female chastity. Although the times changed fast, education was not comprehensive. The living conditions of the underclasses were so difficult. They lacked education and moral discipline with regard to sex. As a result, two scenarios emerged during this period. Middle-class women remained chaste and dignified, focusing on the sanctity of marriage and the legitimacy of sexual behavior, while poor women were more casual in their sexual behavior. Because of social morality, unmarried mothers were socially ostracized in the event of unmarried pregnancy. So, a sad situation occurs where, once pregnant, most unmarried mothers abandon their baby outside the orphanage. In 1852, there was even a magazine article claiming that the womb of an unmarried mother was Satan's crucible. In such times, an organization known as the Baby Farm was born. Back then, numerous ads seeking childcare help were on the streets. Some middle-aged women, pretending to be reputable married ladies with good-looking families and claiming a love for childcare, offered to take care of baby for women at a good charge. These transactions looked perfect, but the reality was cruel. Unmarried mothers think that by handing over their kids to baby farms, they can start their lives over again without any worries. But only few children who lose the protection of their mothers survive, because some farmers used baby farms, made dark money. In the dark and damp corners, milk bottles were just chucked out, and the glass bottles and rubber hoses became a breeding ground for bacteria. Baby farmers have no qualms about using these dirty bottles to feed their innocent babies, and with their delicate intestines infiltrated by bacteria, poor newborns often suffer from diarrhea and infections. Secondly, in order to save costs, they would also mix large quantities of flour into the milk powder, resulting in the baby getting thinner and thinner. For those who developed teeth, refused to eat and cried, they would use tooth powder containing mercury, which gradually ulcerated the baby's mouth and made the cries weak. For those active and mischievous babies, the farmer also had a syrup that could put babies into a regular stupor. It was called baby hearing water, and it contained a large amount of opium as a stabilizing ingredient. The most disturbing thing was that some people take money from those unmarried mothers, adopt babies, simply kill them within a few days, and then move to another place. October 11th, 1892, at 25 Burren Street, Macdonaldtown, a suburb of Sydney, New South Wales, two men were working in the backyard. Because this house had a clogged drain, they needed to dig out the pipe and check it for the cause of the clog. During the excavation, a worker named James found a badly decayed skeleton. As it was similar in size to a small animal, James and his colleague thought it was a cat's skeleton. No one considered it might be human. The next day, James unearthed another decayed skeleton, which was less decomposed than the first one. Realizing he had found two infant skeletons, James reported it to the police. The police acted swiftly. Through rental records, they found the previous tenants were 47-year-old John, his wife Sarah, and their two daughters Blanche and Florence, who lived there from June 29th to August 16th. Meanwhile, the coroner determined the first skeleton was a male infant buried about 3 months ago, and the second a female infant buried about 6 weeks ago. The burial times matched John's tenancy. On October 12th, Senior Officer Joyce visited John and Sarah's new home at Redfern Wells Street, 1 kilometer away. But without evidence, he just asked a few questions and left. 2 days later, a decayed male infant skeleton was found at nearby Zemia Street. Suspecting a connection, Joyce returned to John's house. In the backyard, he saw some disturbed soil and dug, but found nothing. A few days later, John and Sarah moved again. Their frequent moves aroused the police's suspicion, who thought the skeleton at Zemia Street was moved by John and Sarah to mislead the investigation after they learned about the discovery of the buried skeletons. November 2nd, Joyce and a police officer went to 25 Burren Street again. They looked into all of John's rental records and found that he had lived here longer than any other house. They suspected that there were more skeletons buried in the backyard. Their guess was proved right. While digging, they found another 5 skeletons. November 3rd, John and his 2 daughters were arrested at John's new home by Joyce. John's wife Sarah had already been arrested. All 4 family members were in the police station. they were questioned separately. In the end, John and Sarah were charged with the death of a female infant. Blanche and Florence were charged with being involved in the death of the related children. November 12th, police found a total of 15 infant skeletons. They were buried in different houses where the Makins had lived. During the trial, John and Sarah were sentenced to death by hanging. The judge said to John, "You took money from the mother of the child. You deceived her with your promise. You never intended to keep it, and you never did, because you had already decided to kill the child. You lied about your address and tried hard to make any search fruitless. In the end, in order to prevent the child from being found after the child's death, you buried it in your backyard as if it were a dog's body." Everyone who has heard this case will believe that you were engaged in the extremely wicked baby farming business. The yards of the 3 houses you lived in, together with the terrible evidence of these skeletons, show that you were carrying out this kind of evil and hellish business, destroying the lives of these babies for profit. On August 15, 1893, John was hanged. His wife's death sentence was changed to life imprisonment because of a successful appeal through a petition. In reality, as early as March 31, 1892, the state of New South Wales had enacted a Children's Protection Act. The legislation provides for the enrollment of children under the age of 3 for adoption, prohibits the payment of a lump sum for such adoption, and only allows for a maximum of 20 shillings per week. However, the couple remains completely unaffected, even though their infamous activities were carried out after the legislation was implemented. February 12, 1892, by the Cooks River in New South Wales, 19-year-old Ward gave birth to a boy. 2 months later, as a single mother, she had no choice but to place an ad in the newspaper, hoping a kind and loving woman would adopt her baby. The next day, a middle-aged couple found Ward. Ward, a young maid working for different employers and often interacting with various people, usually observed people's expressions during conversations. But this time, given the potential ruin if the baby transaction was exposed, she was too nervous to scrutinize the couple. The couple introduced themselves as John and Sarah, accompanied by a girl named Daisy. Then Sarah's expression turned sad as she mentioned their son had died of illness years ago. They wanted to adopt Ward's baby to fill the void, and at Daisy's strong request, John noticed her hesitation. He said they currently lived in a small house on Kettle Street in Redfern, but promised to move to a larger house after adoption, and would inform Ward of their new address for visits. Upon hearing this, Ward, suppressing her grief, handed over £5 and her son to the Makins couple. April 15, 1892, in Woolloomooloo, New South Wales, a maid named Clara gave birth to a girl. As looking after the baby would affect her work and her employer didn't allow her to bring the child, Clara decided to give up the baby. Hoping for a better life for her daughter, instead of abandoning her carelessly, Clara placed an ad to find loving adoptive parents for her daughter. On May 16th, after receiving a letter from 16 East Street, Redfern, Clara and her married eldest sister visited the middle-aged couple, John and Sarah, who had adopted Ward's son a month prior. Inside the house, Clara saw the couple living with several teenagers. Sarah held her 2-year-old son and said they had nearly 10 children and lots of baby-carrying experience. She assured Clara she'd treat the baby as her own. John also told Clara they were moving and buying a poultry farm. To ease Clara's worries, he promised to inform her of their new address. On May 18th, Clara visited her daughter, but by May 24th, John's house was empty, and Clara received no more correspondence from the couple. June 10, 1892. In Paddington, New South Wales, a maid named Minnie gave birth to a girl. Unlike other unwed mothers, the child's father, Bothamley, was willing to support the child. June 21st, Minnie placed a newspaper ad seeking a kind-hearted person to care for her baby. That night, she received a letter from a man calling himself Bert, living at 109 George Street, Redfern. He claimed to have a wonderful family and offered to care for Minnie's child for 10 shillings a week, allowing Minnie and Bottomley to visit any time. By this time, 3 months had passed since the introduction of the Children's Protection Act, and people were becoming familiar with it. The offer of 10 shillings a week was attractive, so the next day, Minnie and Bottomley visited John's home. They checked the family's authenticity and made an agreement with John. They wanted to test whether the couple could properly care for the infant before paying. Minnie then entrusted her child and some clothes to John. 2 days later, she bought new baby clothes and visited her daughter again, this time meeting Sarah, John's wife, who seemed very loving. 3 days later, Minnie and Bottomley visited again, only to find John had moved to 25 Burren Street, MacDonaldtown. After learning John had moved his new address, Minnie didn't think much of it. Due to being busy, she waited a week before visiting Burren Street, where she saw her well-cared-for daughter. John and Sarah passed the test, and after Minnie and Bottomley had discussed the matter for a while, they made an agreement with John that every Saturday they would come and visit the children, and as such, they would also pay a weekly honorarium of 10 shillings. Once during a visit to her daughter, Minnie saw a business card that said, Miss Makin's, nurse and qualified midwife. This was Minnie first learned the couple's real last name. At first, Minnie had suspicious thoughts, but Sarah found out about it. She admitted to the mistake, so Minnie didn't take it personally. However, the couple have earned several lucrative paychecks. 10 shillings a week wasn't much for them, and there's no turning back once a murder is committed, so they have to plan a plausible death for Minnie's daughter. July 23rd, Minnie and Bottomley were told by John that their daughter had accidentally come down with a cold. As we all know, even in modern times, a cold is a serious condition for an infant with a very weak immune system, let alone in Victorian times. So for the next 2 weeks, John wrote to tell Minnie about it. The first letter, he said that the child was very sick, so he would take her to the doctor, and the second letter, he said that the child had sadly died. August 4, Minnie and Bottomley went to John's residence with a bouquet of flowers. They wanted to have a funeral for their daughter. When they saw with their own eyes the body of the child covered by a long white cloth, Minnie wept continually, and Bottomley consoled her gently. Then John said to them that perhaps it would have been better for her to be dead, and that, at least, the sickness would not have continued to torment her. Bottomley asked John if a death certificate had been issued for the baby. John said that she had become so wasted with sickness that he did not care to go to the doctor for a death certificate, and, besides, he had ordered a coffin, and he was willing to spend £2 for the child's burial. In fact, the baby girl died as a result of John and Sarah's persecution, and the reason they were afraid to approach a doctor to open a death certificate was because it needed to check the child's cause of death. They volunteered to bury the child, also in case Minnie got suspicious and went to the doctor to check the cause of death. 1892. Within just 8 months, this couple adopted and murdered 15 infants. That's why baby farms are always a disturbing topic. From the end of the 19th century to the beginning of the 20th century, no one can imagine how many infant victims there were in this era.